door?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I was thinking more the danger was coming from the other way, but it's like you go up there from like storage or something? Yeah. Okay, it's not like a walk the plank kind of situation. The upper room. Yes, ma'am.
Ninja exit.
You said the 5 covenants?
Adam, I got to do it in order. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David. Did I get it right? Yeah. Epic of Eden. That gives you the order. So you have the creation, and there's different covenant, and then honestly, which is a great thing with that, just while we're letting everybody get settled. One of the things she does with that is show, we talk about like old and new covenant with Jesus, but the truth is like God's consistent, but there are different sort of covenantal enactments and all that. So there's a covenantal, just in creation with Adam. In Noah, the covenant is after the flood, the rainbow, which is like the ark of a, Clyde would probably, I don't know if y'all, I assume there's a few hunters in the room. The business end of the bow is the bent part, right? So it's when it's bent away from the earth, it's a symbol of I'm not going to shoot towards the earth anymore. That's sort of destruction is not the way to fix this. Every inclination of every human heart was only evil all the time. And then Abraham, Genesis 12, through you and your family, the whole world will be blessed. It gets enacted in like 15 and 17. They laugh at it, you're going to have a kid, the whole business. And then Moses, 10 Commandments, that's a covenant made with God there, which talks about that. When they get in the land, David's covenant is rooted 2 Samuel 7. 2 Samuel 7 says that there'll be someone who descends from David that will sit on the throne and sit forever, which Israel sort of wrestled with. What does that mean? And obviously we think that's fulfilled in Jesus. But those are sort of and that's the order in which you have creation, then you have Noah, the flood, and then really the Bible starts to look like the world that we inhabit post the flood. Before the flood, people were living like really long times. Serpents are talking. It's just a whole thing. My favorite quote about that, by the way, which I didn't say earlier, was Karl Barth, sort of famous 20th century Swedish, I think, German theologian. I don't know if this was a historical event, but I love it. He was lecturing somewhere in like Oxford, and someone came up afterwards and said, Dr. Barth, you're brilliant, you have all these degrees. You can't possibly think we should take seriously, or you believe that a serpent spoke. And reportedly, Barth said, my dear, it's not whether the serpent spoke or not. It's what the serpent said that matters. And I just absolutely love that. Let the hearer understand. So thank you for that question, the covenants. All right, coming back. How are we doing? We're coming back in? If you're walking in, you miss anything, we're buying time. Joel said he had to go with the dogs out, so we got to buy time for him. So, and what? And feed the horses. He's going to mess that up. I can feel it. Nah, he'll get it done. All right, any questions, comments, anything you want to share coming out of talking about the fall and how we trade the truth of God for a lie and practice that lie and are deformed by it, exiled and listening to the wrong storytellers, fear, shame, blame, meaningless, voidless, purposelessness. Anybody?
Was I the only one confused by number 3?
No, you're not, because I don't know what we're talking about, so I'm confused with you right now. What's number 3?
Sorry.
Yeah. What is your name? I'm sorry?
My name is Melinda.
Melinda. I'm Ben. Nice to meet you. Okay. What's number 3?
Yeah, what is number 3? It's the way...
Oh, it's in one of the questions? Okay, hold on. Let me get to the page. Yeah. I like him. That's good.
Everybody likes me here.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Session.
I'm on the fall, the whole thing, or?
Well, I'm just not. Well.
The question 3?
Why are we here?
Who are we and why are you here?
My question for number 3 was,
Section 3, or I'm sorry, or question 3 on page 31.
Okay, all the questions on session 3.
Okay, go ahead. Go. I'm with you now. I know what we're talking about. Go ahead. Great.
So, we had some trouble with answering 2 and 3. So I was just wondering if...
2 and 3 of the questions? Uh-huh. Yeah, so 2 is about how the way we conceive of God, why the map matters, and why we understand the story the storyteller is. Because if God is a thing to be feared and hidden from, then that's a very different God than we meet in Jesus. Or if God is capricious, that is like unpredictable and changes, is different. You think, well, who would talk about God that way? Well, basically the Greeks and Romans. These are not, if you watch like, any of the Roman or Greek mythology stuff you read, like these are, they're human-ish, but they have like superpowers. And Zeus might smite you for fun. That's not how the Hebrew folks talked about God, pretty uniquely. And I'll say, one of the really unique things about the Jews and the Hebrew people, and then Christians, as a part of, I hope I'm not on dangerous ground there. Jews and Christians are talking about the same God. We may be saying some different things, but there's just really no way to make sense of it, saying we're not saying the same God. And to some degree, Muslims claim descendancy from Abraham as well, their Abrahamic faith. Just a different line there, and a different story being told. Hagar, right, and Ishmael rather than Isaac. As the descendant of Abraham. By the way, there's still Samaritans. Did y'all know this? It blew me away. I had mastered divinity, and I did not know this. Well, here's the thing. I met he was like a 14-year-old punk Samaritan on a donkey trying to block the path of this group I was with. We were at Mount Gerizim. Mount Gerizim is where the temple still exists. Met the Samaritan high priest. You can still go for Passover and watch them perform the rites of Passover. It's open air there, so it's slightly different than it would have been in the second temple that Solomon builds and the Romans destroyed in 70 AD. The Romans are good at destroying things, by the way. You can still go and see some of the rocks they knocked off 2,000 years ago. And we went to see them. It's a pretty interesting experience. They have very similar language to much of what we would recognize in our Old Testament. And yet Mount Gerizim and not Jerusalem is where you ought to worship. Very, very interesting. So the Samaritans there met them. The high priest was there, and he gave us a tour, and his grandson was with him that day. And his grandson was probably 23, 24, and was sick as a dog because he was hungover. I recognize the signs because I'd read it in a book. What's that? I've heard of it. Right, and so we were there. It was just funny because his granddad was like trying to get him to be a part of like, this is your legacy and your tour. And he was like green and couldn't quite, he's like, oh, we went out last night and the high priest wearing all his garb and it's like, oh, kids. And I just thought like, yeah, in every culture, this is how this goes across the generations. So why am I talking about Mount Gerizim? Melinda, why? Why would you do this to us?
I was just asking what the answer was to number 2.
Number 2. You and your numbers. 2. Oh, yeah, conception of God. So if we have a different conception, if God is a angry God who wants to catch us, it'll change how we work. We worship to appease a God who's angry. If God is not trustworthy or might change his mind, then we can't be consistent about that promise. So that's asking, in your growing understanding, if you go back to your timeline, think about your own story and how your understanding of God has grown, are there ways in which we've thought about God that turned out to maybe not be true or damaging in that thought? That's what 2's kind of asking. And that instead of God's voice, it's fear and shame. Shame is probably the trickiest one there because I said earlier, like conviction isn't shame. Conviction may not feel great. Like there's things that are good for us that doesn't feel great, like kale, right? It's disgusting, but apparently it's good for us. It's all right if you put enough stuff on it. But conviction is the feeling that, oh, I have done things that are not who I have been called and created to be. I have done things that are less than God desires for me. Shame says you are less. It's not to be missed, by the way. Like we talk about this, Hasatan, where we get our word Satan. Hasatan is the prosecutor. So the prosecutor. Hasatan is the one who tries to make the charges stick. In Job, when Hasatan comes before God, by the way, and the taunt of Hasatan to the throne of grace is, they don't really love you. They only love what you do for them. That's what he says. He's like, no, Job's cool. And then Job goes through some stuff. We don't have to get into that right now. But Hasatan is the prosecutor. They're guilty, and they deserve to be tortured or left out and unloved. God says, nope, they're mine. And that's the defining thing about them. So the biblical God, I would say. Does that help at all? You're looking at me. Keep going. Let me just say also here's the other thing. We have a wrong thing. If we think that belief and faith is a head trip, then having the right answers makes us good. and that will mean God loves us. And so then doubt is the enemy. I don't think that's true. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. Fear is. If you ask questions, you can learn things. I remember the little kids, not little kids. Is it little kids? No. Little kids trying to come to Jesus, and Jesus says, Jesus is, kind of his posse was like, hey, no, he's really important, leave him alone. He's in the zone or whatever he's teaching. And he goes, no, and in the King James, this is my favorite because I have 4 kids, Jesus says, suffer the children unto me. I'm like, yeah, but it's exactly how it feels sometimes. Not you guys, I'm sure you're wonderful. But let them come, right? And then they're like, huh? And he goes, unless you'll come like a child. Faith like a child is sort of privileged. And I thought that meant faith that doesn't question. That's what I thought before I had kids. You guys, I can tell, you guys ask questions, don't you? Yeah? They're like, stop looking at me. Why? I know, why? So you have these, that's right. I have kids, they can ask questions within a question wrapped in a question. And I'm still unraveling the first question, and we've moved on. I'm like, did you want to know or just ask that question? Here's the amazing thing. They think I know stuff. Don't tell them, but I know all the time. Some things I do, some things I don't.
Right now?
And I would make fun of my, what's that?
Is that what you're doing right now?
Yeah. Who invited her? I'm totally kidding. That's great. So no. If we think God wants us to know all the answers, then we have to have those. But I don't think that's right. I think your questions are great. So come back and say, push again. Doubt is not. So ask the question. What is it that you feel like? By the way, you don't have to fill this out to complete it. But what is it you feel unclear about in your group? Did Melinda come back?
So I totally know I won't be a Baptist after this. But what my question?
It's all the same. My dad's a recovering Baptist. It's great. It's not a problem.
I guess it's just number 3 is a little confusing. It's like
3.
How has sin, blame, and trading the truth of God for a lie marked your relationships, experience, community, or sense of belonging? Yeah, so that's exactly very complex sentence that I'm going to fix, and I don't know who did that. I'll fire him later. It's by me. And I will say, what? I like it. Good. Points for you, sir. Why? This is helpful. This is why we're still working this. So we cut down a lot. These books used to be much larger. So if you want more information, more questions, we have it. But we were trying to streamline it. And when we did, I think maybe that collapsed a lot of things into one line we might want to give some breadth to. But if you recall the conversation we had about, if it's hard for you to come up with the ways this might take root in your life, one of the ways to do it is to work, to reverse engineer it. So where do relationships hit rocks? So is there some consistent thing for you? Or your experiences in life? Are there patterns in your life where everything goes fine until I say yes to everybody because I think if I say no, they won't love me until I'm overloaded and then my life falls apart. Or I have to so that would be one, I'm making that up. That may not be you. What's that? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm just saying, that's the thing. If I say yes to everybody, then they'll love me. And then the only problem there is, then you wind up saying yes to everything, and people will, take from you things that don't belong to them, right? So, and they won't love you more, right? But they can use you more. And so finding out what it is you're here to do and your purpose sometimes means, I'm falling into this pattern where I'm trying to prove I'm enough or lovable or belong, and I don't have to do that, which is partly what we're going to talk about now, but sometimes we can work it backwards. You may feel blame more than you see it in yourself. It's hard. But I'll say this is one of the things, there are real, there's real trauma, right? And there's real social issues, and there are real issues. We've all lived through the last few decades. Some of you lived through the civil rights movement. Those address real issues in the world. It's always tough to sort of critique any of that because it really is important. No one should feel like they don't belong in the human community. But if your story becomes completely focused on all the wrong that's happened to you and it's always somebody else's fault or some other group, it's its own kind of prison that you need to be liberated from. And I say that because we get to redemption here, and I'll try to transition. John 14 is important. And Jesus is hanging out with all the disciples there. It's a big, long speech. Jesus and John is doing lots of talking. Love it. And he's saying, I'm going to a place. I'm going to prepare it for you. And if we were option 2, people were like, cool, he is fueling up the jet, right? We're going to fly away when we die. But somebody say, he says, in my Father's house there are many rooms. Now, why would he say that? He says that because redemption and being in the family and having a father has meaning to Jesus' hearers and to Jesus himself, why he even talks about God as a father. Not because God's Gandalf, but because father means a thing in the Hebraic ancient Near Eastern world. Why does it mean that? Let's go back. Redemption is a word, redeemed is a word that has functionality within just the world of being Hebraic viewpoint, ancient. When I say that, does that make sense to y'all? Ancient Near East, Israel, the Semitic people? No? Okay, so, I mean, to call them Jews is a little bit misleading because that's a modern faith, and Judean is a type of community around Jerusalem. You could be Galilean and not Judean. Israel is post-Jacob. We told that story last night. And so we can say the people of Israel, the people of God, they had a certain way of understanding the family. And it worked like this. There was in Latin, paterfamilias, head of the household. My brother Art plays with this in hysterical ways. If you haven't seen that movie. I have strange taste in film, so don't be like, that was not a Jesus. It's not Facing the Giants, but it's Coen Brothers. Anyway, so paterfamilias means head of the household. And the ancient Israelite family system was patrilineal, means through the father's line, and patriarchal. I know the patriarchies and Taylor Swift songs and the Barbie movie, but this is a little different. Well, maybe you won't think it is, but here's how I'll present it differently. The family structure was done as which that women were defined, protected, and provided for first by their fathers, then by their husbands, and then by their children, particularly their sons. And if you think, well, I don't need a man, that's right, you don't need a man. That's right, she doesn't need a man. I mean, your dad, this is great, but you don't need a man. That's true in the modern world. You can go to school, you can do things. In the Bronze Age, it's really tough to go back and get your degree. There aren't universities. It's tough to call the police when you're in danger because they don't exist. There's no fire brigade. There's no military that's friends with you. There is only your family. That's it. In a nomadic place in which you move around a lot, not a lot of agriculture, you're herding animals, hunting animals, looking for water. And when you're pregnant, sources close to me report, that takes something out of you. It's very hard to protect yourself or go hunt, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. So the division of that labor makes some sense. Should it have been devaluing? Absolutely not. In the modern sense, maybe it is. But in the ancient world, Abraham is the head of the household. Abraham, through you and your family, the whole world's going to be blessed. That's the story, right? That we're told. Father Abraham has many sons. Yeah. Abraham and Sarah are a great pair in the Bible. They're a set of couples that I really love. Abraham and Sarah, they're advanced in years. They heard this promise from God, and then they thought I'm going to get a little place with some pecan trees, and I'm going to settle down. I'm going to retire. Maybe fish a bit more. He's going to file for Social Security. It's time to get his check. None of these things are possible in the ancient world, but they're getting up there. And God says, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. And Abraham goes, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm old, and Sarah's really old, which is never something you should say, even when it's true, especially when it's true. It's not going to happen. He said, no, your child's going to do this and pass this thing down. That's Isaac and that whole story. What Abraham is saying is, a part of my family is going to go to some other relative. They're going to get the resources to do that and lead this household. When it's a branch of the household, when it's a tribe like this, think of head of the tribe more than just head of family. This gets played out in the story about Lot. Do you know Lot? The story of Lot's really helpful because everybody knows in their family somebody who's kind of like Lot. Lot and his wife are, they put life on hard mode over and over again. Some folks just make life's hard, then they make it really, really hard, and make it hard to be around sometimes. There's actually a scene where Abraham says, look, fine, Lot, you and your wife pick what side of the river you want to walk, have your animals, and then we'll take the other and be fine. But don't go down near Sodom and Gomorrah. We're hearing stories that things down there are not going well. And of course, Lot, being Lot, goes down to Sodom and Gomorrah. If you're thinking, I don't think we have somebody like Lot in my family. You do. Your family knows. Anyway, everybody's got family. Okay. And then he gets captured, right? It says by a king, think rival chieftain. Okay, he gets taken into custody, probably slavery. And then Abraham, head of the household, gets all of the family's fighting force. It's not 3 people, it's several hundred. Yeah, it's hundreds of people. He goes to fight, liberates Lot by that battle, and that word for what he does for Lot, he redeems him. That's the word redemption. Did Abraham tell Lot to go live down there? He said, told him not to. Was it Abraham's fault? Is he to blame for Lot perpetually making life harder and his wife being even harder to deal with? No. And if you think they're bad, the scene with his daughters makes me want to close my Bible every time. And if you hadn't read it, I don't recommend it. By the way, it's one of those passages where I think when people tell me they need more biblical family values in America, I'm like, I agree with you, but we need to be more specific. Because those are not the family values that I'm looking to see more of in America, or anywhere for that matter. There's a cave, there's getting dead drunk. I'm going to stop there, but it's in the book. It's not good. Okay, that's Lot. Is Lot supremely worthwhile? Does Lot have great value, and that's why Abraham? No. It's Abraham's responsibility, and he redeems him. My youngest son's name is Judah, and Judah gives you a peek into this. Judah is the head of his household later, right? He's got sons, and they marry the oldest marries this woman named Tamar. And then that son dies, and then Tamar marries the next one down. That keeps things going. This is the practice, right? Because you can't be like, oh, well, she's going to move back to Cleveland near her mother and go back to being a nurse or something. Like, that's not an option. So she has to be attached some way, so she marries the next oldest son. He dies. Then Tamar's like, okay, I'm going to marry the third. There's a third son. And Judah's like, maybe being married to her is like hazardous for your health. I don't know. He's kind of slow to see to her being married in. Do you know the story? Yeah, Tamar is now a widow. And so she is not directly connected to the family officially. So she finds herself in a pretty desperate situation. And so she knows that Judah is grieving the fact that his wife has passed and is going on a trip. And so she dresses herself in professional hospitality outfits. Yeah, okay, the older women are like, yeah, we know. So this is what happens. And she's by the roadside. Judah walks her way. Tamar knows he will. This is the father of the 2 men who've died. He hires her for the consulting service that she's offering. He's short on cash. He's not carrying his wallet, so he gives her some like assurance of payment with a ring and a walking staff. Then he goes on whatever journey he's on. Later, people in his family come and say, your daughter-in-law has disgraced you in the family. She's been found with child, right? So she's supposed to be waiting for Judah and his authority as the head of the household to integrate her in the family properly, but she's been out fornicating. Look at the evidence of her fornication. It's bulging in her tunic. And he goes, okay, the law says to stone her. So they're like all getting rocks. And there's some other ways they would do this. We don't have to get into it right now, but it's not good. And they're bringing her for him. And Tamar says, just one thing. The person who has put me in this state is the owner of these things, Judah's ring and his staff. Do you know what Judah says? Let her go, for she is more righteous than I. Why? Because it was his role with the authority he had as the head of household to establish a proper place for her in the family. And if you think that sounds weird, go look up the names of the women, 5 of them named in the genealogy of Jesus. Tamar's one of them. You think you got a family? Jesus comes from one. And all the women's stories, pretty interesting. Head of the household, his responsibility. When, you remember Joseph with his red coat? Remember that? All the brothers are jealous of him. It's the oldest brother that tears his rags when they think he's died, right? Because he's the responsible one. Power and responsibility go together. He's to redeem him and pay for them. So redemption is sometimes contested, and the responsibility of the more powerful person, even if it's not their fault, to blame. We want to blame, that doesn't work. So what will happen? All right, then let's see. Redemption is also seen in other stories. Hosea, you know Hosea the prophet. Great prophet, young, talented proclaimer of the word, sent to a place like Clyde, Texas, a winsome and handsome man. I saw his graduation from Asbury picture. It's beautiful. He looks beautiful in the picture. He gets there, and then a word from the Lord comes to him and says, "Go, you new man, preacher sent to be the person in town, Hosea, and marry a woman of harlotry." And, you know, when we get words like this, we go, "Okay, Lord, one more time." Yeah, go and marry a woman of harlotry because that's what Israel's done to me. And so he goes and finds this kind of street saturated woman named Gomer. The only other Gomer I know is Pyle. So it's not looking good for Gomer, this girl named Gomer. And we're talking about stories. What's Gomer's story? Her name is Gomer. I don't know in any language that's a good thing. And she's been on the street, and that's how she makes her living. And here comes the new rabbi who says, God said I should marry you. And she's like, "That's funny. It's going to be this amount." He's like, "No, I mean it. I'm going to take you back home, and we're going to make a family." And they do. They have kids. They're listed. The names are horrible. Like no one goes, "You know, I'm going to go to the Bible and find some names." They do that. They never to go to Hosea and go, "Oh, those kids' names are sweet." They mean Israel has cheated on me. That's what it means. Like the kids' names are like, "The land will be desolate with your adultery." Like they're not inspiring, right? It's not like Melinda? Miranda. Melinda. Well, see, when I said it, you didn't confirm back to me that was your name. I felt like you left me hanging after all of our connection earlier. Melinda. Okay, it wasn't pretty like that. You know, it wasn't Bella. You know, it wasn't Ariel. You know, I don't know why I'm all Disney princess right now. Anyway, I do have a 10-year-old girl, that's why. But not like in my closet. She's my daughter. That sounded super weird. It's the afternoon. We got to race to the finish line here. We're not racing. Where were we? Hosea. All right. Then they have this family. Then Hosea 2 is a poem about God's love for Israel and his people, and all that he did and all that he's doing and his love. It's beautiful. Hosea 3, okay, Hosea 1 is the call to marry Gomer, the kids, terrible names. Hosea 2, this amazing love of God for Israel, his people, and it is unrequited in so many ways and unresponded to or not faithful to. Then Hosea 3, it's an amazing line. It starts with this. It says, the word of the Lord came to Hosea again and said, "Go and buy your wife back." Something's happened. And it seems, and this is what's dangerous about the lying stories of shame and blame and fear, is that those stories, if they're not dealt with, even though she's been pulled out of it into a totally different story, now she's a proper woman and a proper family, gets to be a part of the synagogue and the village, and she's respected, and she has children, and she has a family. Something in some way, she decided all that wasn't real, and what was real was when she was feeling degraded and when she was being sold. Hosea is told to go to the man who's profiteering from this practice and pay him. So he goes to his pantry and he goes to his purse, gets everything he has, and goes to the city gate, which is like the county courthouse, so to speak, and pays for her. And the word for what he does, redeems. Hosea redeems Gomer, brings her home. And this is unto us, God says, what I will do for Israel. Another woman who makes the list of Jesus' ancestors is a woman named Ruth. Some of you are at your table. It's a fantastic book. Is after Judges, which is a depressing. People think Job is the most depressing book. I think Judges may be the most depressing. It's not great. Things are not going well. And right after that, we get Ruth. Interestingly enough, the prophets have already warned us in the law to be careful and concerned about foreign gods and foreign women, especially foreign women with foreign gods. Naomi's in Bethlehem. Bet is house. Bethlehem means the house of bread. So Ruth begins with the interesting line, there was a famine in the house of bread. There was a famine in the land of Bethlehem. And so she and her husband and their 2 sons go across the river, the Transjordan, across the Dead Sea to Moab. who are related to the people of God in Israel, but not really insiders to that. And the sons of Naomi marry two Moabite women. One is Oprah, which I think was what Oprah's parents were aiming at and missed, but now it's Oprah, and she did okay. And then Ruth, the husband of Naomi dies, then her two sons die. And so she tells those women, here are the family structure. This is why you're like, why are we talking about this? The family structure, here's how it works. They say, oh no, but you're our family. And she says, if I find a way to have more sons, you'll be too old to marry them. Right? The only way she can conceive of them being connected is through dad, husband, sons, or in-laws. And so Oprah goes home to her family. But Ruth clings to Naomi. And what does she say? Your God's my God, your people are my people, your dirt's my dirt, me and you, which is really interesting because she's a Moabite. And it is one of the most clear declarations of a true Israelite faith. Look out for foreign gods and foreign women, but sometimes the place that you think is less is the clearest expression of what is good. By the way, biblical trivia, do you know the first mortal to give God a name in the Bible? It's in the Abrahamic story, but it's not Abraham. Hagar. Hagar is the handmaiden, and it's a rough story. And when she is by the water thinking that her life is over and she's run away, God comes to her and they have a conversation and she says, you are the God who sees me. It's the first mortal to give a name, which is awesome. That it is an Egyptian-born, concubine-ish handmaiden. God seems to care about everyone, even the ones that the culture treats as disposable. Maybe even those are his favorites. Well, he kind of likes women who are too old and some that are too young when he's looking to invade stuff. So Ruth and Naomi go back to Bethlehem. Naomi is, she's not sunshine and rainbows. She's pretty sad. And they go back, and Ruth goes out to glean. There's instructions, and it may make sense to you when you've run into stuff to leave the corners of your field. Like if you're doing, tractors make sense, but if you're rounding things to harvest, leave the corners for widows and orphans. Why? Because widows and orphans don't have these family units. Why does it say even in the New Testament, remember the poor, especially widows and orphans? Because there's no family structure looking out for them. They're exposed in the way, and that's both literal and metaphoric, but the widows and orphans. So we think about who are the widows and orphans. Some of them are widows and orphans, and some of them are in the same position as widow and orphans. No one else is there to supply. So Ruth goes and gleans the corners of a field, and then he finds a way that this guy Boaz invites Ruth to the gleaning, which is kind of nice. And she goes home and she tells Naomi about this, and Naomi goes, oh, who? And then she goes, Boaz. And Naomi goes, he is by the way, she no longer tries to exclude Ruth from the family, right? That sort of fusion has happened. He's our what? What does she call? Kinsman redeemer. You got some people that read the Bible in here. Well done, Monty. My folks, I've told them 5 times and they don't know. Good job, Cynthia. Kinsman redeemer. And then she goes, here's what's going to happen, all right? And then in the background, if you can hear Reba singing, because she said, all right, we're going to paint your eyes and lids. Here's your one chance, fancy, don't let me down. It's in the book. The threshing floor is a bit like saying, oh, she's a girl that hangs out at a lot of truck stops. There's labels for that. Jesus loves them, but I'm saying that has an idea. We miss it because it's not our culture. That's what's hard about biblical reading. So she gets sent to the threshing floor where good young Jewish girls, no girls really, go at all. And it's almost, lots of the agrarian stuff has sort of almost a fertility type undertone. Does that make sense? One of my professors, Dr. Heller, was great. Anytime it was sort of suggested, he would always do this, so we wouldn't miss the point. And so you're like, they're on the threshing floor. It's like saying, and then the lights went low and the candles were lit. You know, like it's setting an atmosphere. And here's where, in our modern journey of writing, we spill all this ink about what kind of girl Ruth is, which to the original hearers of this story and knowers of it would be an utterly beside the point question. Because the question they would have is Boaz a kinsman redeemer? What kind of man is Boaz? Right? Because she goes to the threshing floor, remember the story? And she uncovers his feet. We're all mostly grown in the room, right? Okay. His feet. And he goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you doing here? If we don't deal with this, he even says this, they'll talk, right? So why don't you curl up and sleep there, and then tomorrow I'll go and talk because there's someone with a closer claim in the family tree for taking responsibility for you. But if he doesn't take it, we can do this a different way. So he goes, and the other guy goes, wait, that'll mess up my life. I renounce my claim to her redemption. And that's what Boaz does. He redeems Ruth. They have children, they have more children, and they go down the line to David and David's brothers, a man after God's own heart in Jesus' own line. Redemption restores widows and orphans back to the family. Those who don't have a place get it. It can be risky, and it's a conflict with those that would keep things that don't belong to them, like Lot. Not because Lot is immensely valued, but because Lot belongs to Abraham. It's Abraham, that's why. Judah must take care of Tamar, not because he feels bad about having a grief tryst with a professional hospitality coach. I'm running out of words here. We all know what's going on here, right? And so, and with Hosea, it's something that might be embarrassing to the one who goes and knows redemption, but it doesn't matter if that's the thing that belongs to you, and it might cost you everything in your pantry and your purse. Don't you know that you've been bought with a price? Scripture tells us. We've been redeemed, restored. Not because we have to bring value to the table. God declares it over us, and not because it's God's fault or blame. That's why blame doesn't work. So, Jesus is sitting with his friends, his followers, disciples, and says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Believe in God, believe also in me, right? That's trust and commit to the cause. If it weren't so, would I tell you that I was going to go and prepare a place for you? And this is where, my man, you got where you are, man. You got the 25 Jesus points because you raised your hand. The Thomas of the canary in the coal mines. Thomas goes, yeah, Professor, we don't know where you're going, so how could we possibly know the way? To which Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Not the lie we trade the truth for, not the death we seem so hell-bent on sharing. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now, if we have, to your question, the wrong conception of God, the God who wants us to go to hell, I don't think that's God at all. But if we have the God who wants to go to hell, then when we read John 14 and it says, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, we might read it and I hear it and he stands out there, the cosmic bouncer, and he goes, nobody gets to the Father except going through me. I don't know, I can't not do it without a John Wayne thing. I got to work that out. It wasn't very good. I got to work on that. But if he's saying to people who are lost, this is the way. If he's saying to people who have known the lie, this is the truth. If he's saying to folks who don't believe that they have a purpose or they have power or they have worth, that you do, and that death has haunted, then here's the life. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. It's an invitation, not a confrontation. We can read that wrong in the redemption story if we frame it that way. All right, y'all with me so far on redemption and how it addresses not just the things that have gone wrong, but it puts God in that redemptive story. And so Jesus says, in my Father's house, there are many rooms. In my Father's house, there are many rooms. So the way the house worked was you didn't get your own house far away, but if you were in the family unit, it'd be in the house, which meant you were under the provision and protection of that household, that father. Like Abraham who fights for Lot, like the kinsman redeemer Boaz that redeems and makes Ruth his wife, like Hosea who pays the bill on Gomer, even though Gomer's not only been bought from the street, but now is back at it. Do you hear it yet? In my Father's house there are many rooms. There's a place in the family for you. Not just a man sitting on a hill far away. That's fine if you want, I like the song too. But we're option 3 people. And he's saying the Father's taking responsibility. So in the cross, what we have is God saying, you know, I should make a blank. We have some crosses around here. This cross there. This cross. There's a cross. This cross here. People wearing crosses. Yeah. We wear them around necklaces. We decorate our homes with them, which is not bad. But you know what they are, right? It's a hangman's noose. Right? It's a lethal injection. It's a firing squad. It's what the Romans used to say, we're in charge and you are not. It's so bad that if you're a Roman citizen, you weren't supposed to have to die that way. It was a place for slaves, traders, and foreign folk. A way to say, don't buck against Rome. Here's what it looks like. And by the way, Romans were pretty efficient about things. So when you crucified somebody, in my image, it was like, massive cross, like we see in some of the big cities, and they'd be way up there. You just need to be a little bit off the ground. It changed entirely for me when I realized this. And they'd put it at public gate of the city, not inside the gates, but right by it. So when you walk by, it's just a little bit eye level with you. Not way up in the distance, but right there. It's intimate to die this way next to everybody. It is a terroristic tool of those who say they're Lord. In fact, you know this, right? Caesar had heralds go out with the good news of the new Caesar. Here's the gospel of Rome. The good news of Rome, there is a Lord in the land. Caesar's had a child, whether it's Augustus or Julius or Nero and all the rest. There are gospel heralds of that. Romans had these heralds, and they had instruments of torture and death. It was ugly, it was slow and torturous. And that's not what saves us. What saves us is God saying, you're worth more than that to me. It's a God who says, I'll redeem you. And then he says, how ugly and awful this thing is, I'll make it beautiful. So that we can decorate our necks with it, or our rings, or our worship. And as God says, I could take this instrument of Roman torture and death and bring every ugly thing, bring all the wounds, all the fear, all the shame, all the pain, all the blame, bring it here at the level ground of the cross. We're always trying to dig holes for other people to stand in or us. Like, we need more. Level ground at the foot of the cross. Grace abounds. Bring it here and watch as those things even can be made beautiful. They can be redeemed. The Levitical codes of the contagion of rot and ruin can be turned inside out so that now the contagion is hope. Now the contagion here becomes all of this movement this way, so that the invasion go this way. The Spirit will be poured out upon young and old, and you join in, so in us, so in Jesus, that in us. I'm pouring the Spirit on you so that you can do the thing that I've trained you to do. Remember, it's not about escaping hell, it's about defeating it. Just like, remember that kid, Ruth's grandkid, David, the kind of red-haired, ruddy one, right? Depending on how you want to translate that. Remember that Valley of Elah? And the, Manute Bowl, Yao Ming looking Goliath, that was his name, yeah, he was Goliath, yeah, he played in the championship Canaanite tournaments, right? And he would come out in the valley and he would taunt the Israelites. And he would say, you're a bunch of weak folks. And then they try to put the armor on, remember that? By the way, Saul's supposed to be the right king. And then he puts the armor on David. Saul's supposed to go do this. David's like, I can't do this. What does David do to kill Goliath? Yeah, which is it's not a toy. It's a serious weapon, if you've seen these things. They could throw these things at really fast speeds. How many shots did it take David? How many stones did he take? 5. Why? Because he didn't go out there to domesticate Goliath. Goliath had to die, right? We don't try to mute or make a deal with the dominion of that which is not. My favorite description is in Revelation, right? So Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the one who was, who is, and who is to come. The not Christ, the Antichrist, is described as being the one who was not, is not, and won't be. Right? It's the negation of those things. And I'm not great at biblical numerology. Y'all may be better at this. But 7 and 3 are really powerful numbers about completion and perfection, right? 7 days, Trinity. So 3 sevens, there's a reason why you guys wouldn't know. But my East Texas relatives, when they want to sin, they go to Bossier City in Louisiana. And then they sit there and put pennies in a thing and they pull the slot of this, which if you want to gamble, that's fine. 20% is the proper tithe off gambling winnings. Totally made that up. But they would do that, right? 777, right? But if you were going to make a mockery of that and try to be it, but you were always going to fall short because you're the one that was not, isn't, and won't be, you might be one less. 666, that's the mark of the thing that is not. It is the emptiness and the void. And it isn't going to be victorious, but the redemption isn't just about keeping us escaping from here and pulling us back this way. It's about turning around and joining that kingdom being built using the tools and the talents we have, which is why we have to stop trading the truth of God for a lie. Not because God needs you to be sorry. Monty Python didn't need a lot of things right theologically, but they did get this right. when they're always apologizing and saying, when God would show up and one of them, they would say, sorry, we're so sorry. And then the God sort of drawing goes, stop saying that. Everywhere I go, anybody says to me is sorry. Can anybody say anything else? We're so sorry, we're so sorry. Right, you can keep your sorry. It isn't about how you feel. And I will say some of the modern twists on civil rights has gotten this wrong. No one gets fed because you feel bad that someone didn't eat. No one gets liberated because you feel bad that someone else got oppressed somewhere else. But so much of the way we talk about justice now, secularly, not in the church, but in the church too, is rooted in shame, not conviction. Shame shrinks, makes us less and sorry. Conviction grows us and reveals to us what we could be if we believed what Jesus makes possible and says, I've come that may have life, and that life abundantly. The redeemed life has purpose. It is not without purpose. The redeemed life has a place. Place matters so much, and I bet this doesn't land in Clyde like it does in some of the cities that I have lived and worked in, but so much of the angst of the younger generation is rooted in the fact that until about 150 years ago, everybody, save for like Marco Polo, lived and died within about 3 or 4 miles of where they were born. And in some network of people, they were related to a whole network of folks. They never thought, I wonder who I am. I'll have to leave to find out. No one said that until like 75 years ago. It made 0 sense. Because you might rebel, you might not like it. You could rebel against the place you came from, but it wasn't up for debate about who you were, whose kid you were, what dirt you were formed by, what water you drank, what river you defended or you didn't. And so much, and this is not a judgment, it's empathy, it hurts me. And it's part of my own story. I grew up at Lakewood, right? I mentioned that earlier. Lakewood sat in the neighborhood I was in, Lakewood Forest, and the church was called Lakewood, 6 miles from Cypress, Texas. Have you heard of it? And 6 miles the other direction from Klein, Texas. If you were to go from that sign that's out on 149, now it's 249, towards Klein, right now you would find Klein Funeral Homes. No, the Klein brothers. It's a family. That's all it is. There's no Klein other than the Klein family. They run a funeral home. That's the descendants of the Klein people that had a farm there, whatever, back in the day. If you go the other way, 6 miles in Cypress, horse farms. There is no mayor of Klein. There is no mayor of Cypress because they are not. And I lived 6 miles in between them. I lived in a neighborhood built so that the people who worked at Compaq would have a place to live. Compaq Computers became HP, and it was in the north side of Houston. My dad did not work for Compaq, but a lot of the people around us did, and so that's why it was there. It was not a place. It was unincorporated Harris County. It was about an hour and a half southeast of Houston. It had a Houston address, but we didn't have bus service and couldn't vote in the elections. It wasn't a place. It wasn't a place. And so many people live in these artificial places. And in that place, by the way, when the hurricanes came and everybody's commute stopped being an hour and a half, suddenly people had to talk to their neighbors. And some beautiful things happened. Other things happened too, like trees falling in your house. Clyde probably gets the idea of place better than others, but it's something lost that the biblical world cares about. Geography matters in that place. It's formative. And it is deforming to not know where we belong, both historically or presently. Redemption, and so one of the things I can say about Lakewood, it wasn't a perfect church, and I told you the sermon on heaven wasn't quite what I was looking for, but it became a place. It's where I'm from that church eventually. And I'm from East Texas, which is a place. And that place has things that are bad about it, but it was a place. I'm from pine needles and red dirt, clicking dominoes on a round table and secondhand smoke. That's where I'm from. When I think about what formed me. Some of you can smell that room. And so that is redeemed and given power when we come to understand it. And so much of the modern world aches to know a place. And whether it's Clyde or Abilene or places in between, one of the callings of the redeemed people is to tell people who think they don't belong to the dirt, however long they stand on it, that they do. There's a space for them at the table. There is food for them to eat. There is hope for them to share. There's a way, there is truth, and there is life. This takes practice. This takes practice. We have to practice the truth just like we practice the lie before. And so as we trade the truth back to God for a lie, one more biblical story, and this is the last one of this section, and last one for, well, there may be Bible later, but last one for me tonight is this. Jesus we have the birth narrative of Jesus. I mentioned some of the families of him, all the sort of interesting women in the story and other people. Then we have one junior high story of Jesus when he's 12. Remember that one? We have the angels and all this stuff when he's born. And then we don't have much. 12 years old-ish. He's in the temple with the family, and they're like wowing everybody when they come up for a high holy. And then because families aren't like our families, he didn't get buckled into his car seat on the way back to Nazareth. Nazareth, by the way, is a big town now, but in Jesus' day, it was a tiny town tucked away from that highway I talked about earlier. And by the way, Nazareth Ridge, as you look down the valley where the world would go by and you weren't a part of it because you went to Nazareth to be away from that, where Mary and Jesus played, covered in pine needles. And the first time I saw it, I just wept. There's something about that. So maybe there are other things for you that I just couldn't fathom. Jesus played on pine needles. There's something visceral about that for me. It's also not where town is. Town's back a little bit, tucked away on a hill where the Church of the Annunciation is. And Jesus preaches in Nazareth. It doesn't go well. I've had some bad sermons. You may hear one tomorrow. But I've never been threatened to throw off a cliff. But that's what happens. He opens up the scroll. It's Isaiah. And he says, I've come to fulfill this word, right? The release of the captives. And then they're like, ooh. And they're not mad at that part. They like the Isaiah part. They like Jesus. Oh man, hometown kid makes good. They love it. And then he tells them, it's not just for you. It's for everyone in a way. And they go, ooh, no, not here. We came here to be away from them, the Romans, the Greek influenced folks. And so they take him to the cliff to throw him off. And then the text says something strange and then he passed away from them, right? He got away. You ever wondered about that? So it turns out it's a Sabbath when he's speaking, It's a Sabbath. Do you know that there's a amount of steps that you can take on the Sabbath that makes it work, and then you violated the Sabbath? Just so happens you can't quite get to the edge of the ridge from where the synagogue would have been to where they wanted to throw Jesus off. And the rabbi, of course, is counting because that's his job to make sure we don't break that rule. So their own understanding of how God worked or how they were supposed to perform that thing kept them from being able to throw the kid off of the thing, and Jesus passed through their hands, I think the Greek says. And it just maybe it's because they were out of steps for the Sabbath. They had to walk back home, or they were going to be Sabbath violating. And Jesus would later say, just down the road in Capernaum, were humans made to keep the Sabbath, or was the Sabbath made for them? Cynthia knows the answer. That's right. You've read ahead. Nazareth is tucked away off the road. Capernaum's on it. We miss it all the time, but the geography of grace is this, that Jesus moves from the place where no one would hear what was happening in Nazareth to the whole world walks by Capernaum. And when he teaches there, he is teaching the whole world. It'll be whispered about all the way up and down the highway. All right, redemption is costly. Redemption is not because it's somebody's, is not about fault, but who's responsible. The question is not who will be our leader. The question is not who can we blame for this. The question is who is able to respond. So, Clyde, it's not your fault that there are kids in this town who think that there absolutely is no hope for them. I drove around a little bit. I didn't talk to everybody because that would be super weird. And there's more than people I could talk to. But I bet there's kids at the junior high I drove by that believe there is no point to their life, that there is no opportunity ahead of them, that things are only going to get worse and they're not great now. It's not your fault. It's not your fault that 1 in 4 girls in their life will be sexually assaulted. Not your fault that 1 in 7 men will be sexually assaulted. It's not your fault that an increasing number of Americans believe the only way to get through a day is to be high. Because it hurts to breathe and be in real life. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And so all these efforts to make it, it's not your fault that there's no way around that 400 years of race-based slavery in America affected relationships between people with different pigments in this country. Not your fault. Not your fault. You're not to blame. But we're able to respond. And that is fundamentally different. That's why redemption is liberating, not new cages. This is why the French Revolution loses, right? The people who are cutting off heads eventually gets their heads cut off, right? Because it doesn't have a place to take people to a new place. But the gospel does. It restores and reestablishes, protects widows and orphans, and folks like Judah who should have known better. And then when they're convicted, become better. Conviction grows us, shame shrinks us. It is not the story of fear and shame and blame or meaninglessness or anger or woundedness. It is a story of healing and a cross in which God says, bring all the ugly here and lay it down. So if you bubbled up some ugly in your thoughts or your feelings, you can take it to the cross and God can bring it here, bring all of it and lay it down, and God will redeem it. And then you will see him, and your eyes in tears, you'll put your arms around him, and he will say to you, woman or man, we got stuff to do. Redemption leads back to a calling, and here's the biblical story I wanted to give you. Jesus is no longer 12. Now he's about 30, maybe 27. We probably got the numbers wrong. He's 27-ish, and he hasn't really had much of a public ministry. He's been making the word, we say carpenter, right? Joseph was a carpenter. The word is tekton, if you recognize like technology or technical, technician, it's craftsman. In the beginning, the word was God, and God was the word, and everything was made through him. And then when he became human, he took on flesh, and he tabernacled among us, and he worked as a craftsman. Because from the very beginning, Genesis 1, it was a crafting, forming God. And so Jesus crafts, not just with wood, but also stone. There's not a lot of wood in Israel, even now or then. So by the way, if at my grandma's house we played dominoes in the back thing, and I was always worried I was going to miss a trick and didn't quite do it, my great uncles would laugh and yell at me, and they thought that was fun. And it was friendly, but I also didn't want to be the one that didn't call it right. And there was a picture of Jesus by the back door. And the picture of Jesus looked like he had just come from Southern California. And he had the light on his eyes, like he was in a film with no speaking. And he was very pale, very blue eyes, and he was like wispy. Jesus probably had calluses on his hands, and I'm not saying he belonged on Men's Fitness, but I bet he had a little bit of traps on his shoulders. He could handle himself. When you lift stone and wood and work it all the time, you are not soft or weak. Jesus, meek and mild, is something we like to think because then we can tame and domesticate him. Jesus probably was in the sun plenty to not be real pale and had calluses on his hands from the work that he was doing. His cousin John the Baptist, not John the Southern Baptist, though I've offered to Baptists they can have him if we get Luke. Luke the Methodist, because in Luke there's always food. Go read it. Luke's always eating. John the Baptist is out there, and he's out there by the Jordan, plunging people in the water and washing them, preparing them for the way, making straight the path, right? There are ways to get washed on the way up to the temple. I mentioned that earlier. The temple, the mikvahs. There is mikvah baths on the way up to get washed. They're hollowed out and they're there. You still do mikvahs in the Jewish tradition. The waters to prepare yourself to go up to the temple. But what John is saying is that those practices that would clean you are now making you dirty. It's corrupted. Jesus aligns himself with John in saying, it's not working. This structure has now become so broken. It's not that it was bad. It's, anybody bowling? It's not a trick question. Has anybody been bowling before? Yes. If you haven't, do you get the concept of bowling? What's the point of the game of bowling? Excellent. Have you ever gone with like a kid or someone bowling for the first time? Yeah, so what do they do to make the game easier? They put the bumpers up, right? Because when you roll a ball in the gutter, it becomes difficult to knock the pins down because that's not where the pins are. What happens, and it seems this is what Jesus' problem with the law is in the first century, is the bumpers get so thick you can't play. The point of the game is to knock down the pins. The law is not bad. The law is good. Jesus says it over and over again. The hedge around the law that gets so thick you can't roll the ball down the alley anymore, like, yeah, we're supposed to be in a relationship with God. We're supposed to be the way, the truth, and the life. We're supposed to have a place and his presence and his power. We're supposed to live in truth, and all these things we're built for. So it can't happen because it's choked off. The lane's choked off. And he's like, okay, I'll flip some tables over. And I'll tell the Pharisees that if the Sabbath gets so thick you can't rest, it's broken. I can't heal on the Sabbath. What's the Sabbath for? So he pulls that back, and now you can actually bowl. You can knock it down. And so he goes out there with John and says, we got to change the way this is. The game is right. The law is good, but man, it's gotten choked, the lane thing. And so he goes out there, and John goes, no, cousin. I can't baptize you like you're the greater thing. And he goes, no, you got to. I wanted to show that I'm aligned with the movement of this and that God's doing this new thing. He goes into the water, and he comes out. And the Owen Mills moment of the Trinity takes place. I don't know if you did you have Owen Mills in Abilene or here? Owen Mills is a child of the 80s. You put on Navy suits. I don't mean like we were wearing the color Navy. I mean like we looked like we were little sailors, me and my sisters. My dad was in the Army, by the way, so it makes no sense. We all had the Pete Rose haircut, at least I did, which just meant like, it grew and then it laid down in a bowl. And then every year you got one, right? And you just like see the light of your father's eyes go dimmer, because he's growing up. No. It's Owen Mills. You go over there. Now we have phones, and they would do church directories too. Owen Mills, whole family, right? The Son comes out of the water, the Father speaks, and the Spirit descends like a dove. The closest we get to like a sort of a Trinitarian picture. Son comes out of the water, the Father speaks, and the Spirit descends. The Father says, hear this now. The Father says, this is mine. This is my Son, who I love, who I'm delighting in. Then that Spirit that lands on him drives him with purpose. So friends, here's what redemption does in its wholeness. It doesn't just keep you out of hell. It makes that declaration of the Father true for every baptized, believing Christian. You are loved. You belong to God. He delights in you. I know, it's hard for some of us to believe that's true. He delights in you, and there's a Spirit-driven purpose for your life. I didn't do it, but congratulations for all of you guys. That's great. You do. Here's the best bit I can tell you. We know the birth narratives, and they're pretty special. Mary treasures these things in her heart. We know about the 12-year-old scene. This is the next scene we get. In all the Gospels, it's the front end. He hasn't walked on water. He hasn't fed the 5,000 of the 4. He hasn't taught the multitude of the masses. He hasn't walked in the dusty streets of Jerusalem up out to Golgotha and suffered the shame and the brokenness of the cross. He hasn't defeated death. He hasn't done any of those things. If you're anything like me, you think, because I thought, we have to do all those things so that one day we'll hear those words. You're loved, you belong here, you're mine, I delight in you, and you have a purpose. So far as we know, he hasn't done any of that. We think that's the finish line. It's actually where we start. Because if we spend our time trying to earn our way, trying to buy our way, or build our way, we never get there. But if redemption goes to work in us and we find ourselves in the story, it's the beginning of the best part of the story that we're in. What would it mean if Jesus really means it? He came that you might have life and that life abundantly now and forever. And what if it's true? What if it's really true? Not before you earned it, not before Jesus cleaned you up. Christ died for us while we were yet sinners, I think we say from time to time, right out of Romans 5. This proves God's love for us, not some fake image of us. Us. Dirty, messy, silly, wild, foolish us. The reason we talk about God as a parent is I don't understand everything about God, but one thing I have come to learn. I remember holding my son, who is much harder to hold now because he weighs like $180 and plays linebacker. He's still not, you're way out of his league. And he's a good kid. But I remember when he was like the size of a football and not tackling people, carrying them. And I remember getting married taught me like what it meant to like really love a different person. Like it turns out like Holly's a whole different person, not some extension of me. And having kids taught me how to pray. And I remember watching him and knowing I couldn't make him take his next breath. And I remember looking at him as I'm holding him and he's a week old. And I remember thinking, man, is he lousy at walking. He doesn't even know English, much less Spanish. And you've got to know Spanish in this state if you're going to have a future. It's just ridiculous that he doesn't know any Spanish. He had no teeth, so he couldn't chew. There was a soft spot in the top of his head. He couldn't even wear like a heavy hat. It was dangerous for him. If he went into a car, you had to buckle him into like a Teflon encased angel hair that the babies brought with them, protective suit because he was that fragile. He was lousy at math. He'd never gotten his mom a present. He'd hurt her quite much, actually, very recently. That was nearly 16 years ago. It'll be 16 years this April. And I know more things about him now, and I like hanging out with him. Don't tell him, it'll ruin the surprise. But I don't love him more now. Love is not something we earn, it's something we're given. Love is not something we're enough to get or worthy of. It's a transformative gift of God. And not only does it redeem the present moment, but it works backwards and forwards and changes the story we're in, such that even when we're snits when we're 12 and hurt our Father's hearts, they stand next to you and they're your best man at your wedding. Even when we get it wrong, even when we're Judah on the wrong road, too sad to know what to do, and we wind up in the arms of something that's not going to fix it, but it might make it a little bit quieter in the tumult of our heart, and find out that that causes pain to other people. Even then, redemption might still be at work. And for those to whom we have been given eyes to see and ears to hear and have come to the cross and had that forgiveness, it is an invitation, a compelling one, to invite others who believe they don't have value, aren't lovable, aren't worth it, to find that that's a lie and to trade the truth back for that lie and live the abundant life they were designed and desired by God to have. Let's pray. Lord, pour out your Holy Spirit upon the flesh here gathered, that again the incarnation might occur in Jesus Christ, and may these here know now, without question, doubt, or hesitation, at least, Lord, for this perfect moment in your grace, that they are loved, they belong, they've been called and built for a purpose, and in them you delight and love before they knew, before they walked, before they failed, and before they were triumphant on the field or in their faith. You poured out your life and your love on the cross, that all the ugliness wouldn't be our story, that all the brokenness wouldn't tell our future, that the shame and fear and blame and exile from place and purpose that we have known so well, we'd be liberated from and be freed to be yours and each other's, here, now, and forever. We praise you for Jesus, who redeems us, who calls us, who claims us, and then shows us the way. Amen. So you're in solitude, and then are you coming? He's got a mic. Go ahead, Monty.
I was just going to mention solitude until 5:40, and then small groups from that time till 6:30, and I like to meet back in here at 6:30. So
there's some stuff in there on solitude for 4, because I know you'll come back and question, and that's a compliment, not a bad thing. And so in 4, let's see, I'm in 5 here. Let me go back. Similar questions, right? So, trail markers. Trail markers. Okay, those are printed here. So, trail markers are ways in which we see, are we practicing the lie, or are we living in the truth? And so those are like, do I find the language of my life blaming? You know, if those politicians would, I mean, they're right, but like if those politicians, or if those people, or if my neighbor, if that doesn't mean we can't describe things that are wrong in the world, we should, but if blame, rather than how we can be responsible for our own actions and our own life, defines us, blame's the path of the lie, responsibility, truth. Fear is the opposite of faith, not doubt. Fear shrinks us. Fear makes us less, faith grows us. Control and gratitude. If you think, as I'm tempted, that the world would work better if I was in charge of all of it, it's probably a good thing I'm not. If we need to be in control rather than receive with gratitude and trust God, that's a real thing. Scarcity and abundance, right? The belief that there's not enough good things, so I have to make sure I get mine and live with a hand like this and clenched fist. That doesn't mean we're not responsible for our own families, our own households. That's true. But sort of the stewardship life is hand open, and it turns out we can actually hold more. I can't hold as much like this as I can like this, can I? And it overflows. Our cup overflows when we share it. Own and steward, huge for me. Huge for me, because one of the ways I trade the truth of God for a lie is not just that I believe love's a transaction. I also think that I own things that I actually am called to steward. I believe this. I don't own my kids. I steward them. I don't own my wife. I'm to steward her. I don't actually own my body. I'm to steward it. I don't own the gifts of my life, so it's not up to me to say they're not any good. I'm to steward them in the kingdom purposes. Owners, not steward. I mean, stewards, not owners. Stewardship, obviously, is not that. If you believe that you have to earn, lots of times you think life's about a performance rather than showing up, rather than being present. We have to perform or to do a thing to be there. Isolated is different than having some solitude. Solitude's holy. Isolated is not. Connected. Yeah, invasion or escape. Oh, yeah. If we think, how do I bless my neighbor, rather than how do I be better than my neighbor, we're in the line of truth, not a lie. If the story in the end is God's story that we play our part in, or it's my story that I'm trying to own, control, and do those stuff, that's generally the path that leads to the lie. Okay. Those trail markers, just want to put those on there. We have some follow-up stuff we've done. We play with trail markers as sort of a way. Our preschool, day school, goes up to second grade now, I guess, uses like trail markers. Public schools do this too, because my kids do this, but they talk about like, oh, Jenny exhibited generosity today. And so they celebrate that in their day school chapel. They use these trail markers to try to reinforce and practice the good stuff, and educators get this better than preachers do, because we're attempted to write the great original sermon every Sunday, and my educator friends say people have to hear things 7 to 12 times to incorporate them in their life. That's what we want. So we have to practice these things. Spiritual disciplines, we'll talk about tomorrow. Those are the ways to practice these things. Solitude, you have to add some time. Did I mess it up? Did I go too long?
Just wanted to change my mind.
Yeah.
So 30 minutes of solitude, so 5:45.
Okay.
Let's come back into the small groups at 5:45.
Okay.
You have 45 minutes of small group time. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Are you thinking like 7:30? What time do you think? You want to just text you when you leave here? Because I think it's on the corner, like by Judge Ely, and it's like right around the corner from the hotel. I'm going to run by ACU's co-op if it's open or whatever. It's off. Wildcat on it for somebody like.
I forgot to mention small group leaders. Can we meet up there with Joel? Is it too late? Can we still grab everybody for a few minutes?